Welcome to Bucs Insider, presented by Verizon. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and unfortunately this is our first Insider in a while now where there wasn't another game coming up, and it's always sad. But man, I know that after you lose, it stings, it hurts. We've been in the building, we've seen how much this team thought they could win, hoped they could win, and there is that sting of that. But to me, this feels like such a successful season, considering especially the expectations from the outside world to start in. You have the $80 million in dead cap space, and man, was this a fun ride, especially down the stretch.
It was definitely fun. I wouldn't say this in front of a coach or a player because they generally are of the, it's only a successful season if you win the Super Bowl ilk. But if you take a step back from it, as you said, factor in the expectations, the restrictions on the cap, the signing of Baker Mayfield, and a lot of outside expectations of that not being a particularly important signing, and add it all up and you make it to the divisional round and really play a nice game in the divisional round as well. Yeah, to me it feels successful, and probably most importantly, something to build on. So a lot of people thought this would be a rebuilding year for the Buccaneers, but they won the division, made it to the divisional round, and now you feel like you have something. There's work to be done. There's players to be re-signed, hopefully, but you do feel like you have a foundation for continued success, not a bottoming out kind of
which is
situation.
Great, and especially after going all in to win a Super Bowl, it would not be crazy to have said you had to bottom out to come back from that. And the fact that Jason Light and all of them and the coaching staff and everyone was able to make this something very different than bottoming out, to still feel like you're in a good place, and especially coming out of what this was the hardest year in the sense of the cap restrictions, that
sure.
You've got to be so optimistic moving forward. And another part of it that you mentioned, Baker Mayfield, the fact that people discredited some of the things about that signing in terms of the expectations of it. And now, especially these playoff games, he showed that when the moment calls for it, he can be the guy.
Well, yeah, I mean, his two playoff games were pretty much remarkable. He was the first guy the win over Philadelphia. He was the first Buccaneer quarterback ever to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdown passes in a single postseason game. And then he did it again in Detroit. And the funny thing is, 6 touchdown passes in those 2 games, 6 different players.
Wow.
Yeah, he really spread the ball around. And as you see here, he had a couple games with the Browns too in 2020, and his overall pass rating in the playoffs is 100.4, which is 106.7 for the Buccaneers, but 100.4 overall, and that's 4th among all active quarterbacks right now. And you see some pretty prominent names on that list there. So, yeah, he's really delivered when it mattered the most. And we saw that not only on a game-by-game basis, but sometimes on a situational within a game basis. Like, get the you go down, you answer the Lions 3 times, and it goes into the 4th quarter 17-17, and anybody can win from that point. And then the Lions put together 2 nice long touchdown drives, and they're up by 2 touchdowns with 6 minutes to go, and that seems pretty bleak. But he delivered a touchdown drive in 1 minute and 45 seconds, giving the Bucs a chance. You know, the defense had to get a stop, and they did, and got the ball back. Unfortunately, there was the pick at the end. But in a lot of these games towards the end, he's shown that he could deliver when, like, the stakes are the highest.
Yeah, and you talked about how many different people got a touchdown, which, first of all, I think is a testament to this roster, a testament to this new offensive scheme this year to get so many different guys involved. But, of course, Mike Evans, he was the guy. He was still the guy in the offense throughout the year. We saw that he is still playing at such an incredibly high level, and particularly, again, in the playoffs, even though there were a couple drops I know he'd love to have back, his performance was truly incredible. Yeah,
8 catches for 147 yards in that game. That's a playoff record for the Buccaneers. That's the most receiving yards that a player's ever had in a postseason game for Tampa Bay. But it wasn't like he took that mantle away from somebody else, because he now has 4 100-yard games in the playoffs and the top 4 yardage games in team history. I mean, it's just Mike Evans. And so the playoffs are starting to look, the playoff record book basically starting to look like the regular season record book, where Mike holds all those records.
Over and over.
It's just Mike Evans. It's like we have a little on your computer. You have a little macro just to click one button and it puts Mike Evans
in. Yeah, and again, if you're ever at a Bucs trivia event, just
say Mike Evans.
Who
leads the team in sacks?
It's like people used to just fill out all the C's on the bubble chart. You know, just fill out Mike Evans. You're probably good to go. And of course, Rachaad White also just such a huge part of this offense this year that we saw grow and develop as he went along. Both, I mean, the passing game, he was able to be a big impact pretty early on, and then the run game started developing as well. And we started seeing the ways that he and Coach Canales' scheme really fit well together. They found ways to use him, and I loved his touchdown in this game. It felt like such a good combination of execution and then also the play call.
That was my absolute favorite moment of this entire game, because right before the game I said to the person next to me in the press box, they're going to blitz here, and obviously it was 3rd and 10, and obviously Dave Canales knew that as well, and I think he probably also must have figured out that that blitz was coming up the middle. So if you saw this play in slow-mo, here's a next gen, you'll see CJ Gardner-Johnson creeps up, the linebacker creeps up, they blitz up the middle, and there was only 2 defenders left on the right side here. One of them had to follow Kate Otten into the end zone, so the only guy out there was Aiden Hutchinson, and you'll see on these dots here, Luke Gedeke pops out and erases him on a block. So the play, the pass was under pressure. Like, CJ Gardner-Johnson was pretty close to him there, but he got it off in 1.8 seconds, and because of the play design and the perfect timing of this call, when Rashad caught that ball, he had a straight line to the end zone. All he had to do was run straight really fast.
Yeah, which I think he's a fan of.
Yeah. Thought it was just an amazing call.
It was. That was a really great call and a really fun play to watch. Also on the defensive side, the same way we talk about Mike Evans, just a good chance that he's the answer to different trivia questions and things. Levante David, that on the other side. And again, as we talk about the expectations of this team this year, I don't know what the expectations were of Levante on coming back on a 1-year deal, thinking, oh, he's older for a linebacker. Where's he going to be? He looks like he has aged backwards, just like Mike Evans.
They're Benjamin Buttons?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, he had a phenomenal season, and he showed it again in this game. I thought he was the most visible defender for us. He was the guy you always saw around the ball. He had 13 tackles. He had a sack. He's the first guy in Bucs playoff history to have 10-plus tackles and a sack in the same game. And here's hoping that Levante's back next year and maybe beyond, and that the Buccaneers can get back to the playoffs, because you see here he's chasing the all-time great, Derek Brooks, for the most tackles in postseason history. And think about how long Levante had to wait for that.
Yeah. And
eight years with nothing, and now 4 in a row, and he's making it count.
And at the rate that he's tackling, you look at that, okay, so he's 19 short. That sounds like
2 games?
2 games. Yeah, that sounds like
That's all
about
we
2
need.
games. So we need him to come back, and we need to do at least what we did this year, and then he's good to go on that. And we know that this game, we'd heard that the atmosphere was going to be pretty crazy, proved that that was very accurate, and it's an incredible place. It's been very fun to watch for these Lions fans after such a long drought. Hate that we had to be the ones to play them, but their fans really did make for a great atmosphere. But of course, I also love seeing how well the Bucs seem to handle it, where again, we talked about all year, new coordinator, new scheme, all reshuffled offensive line. Those are the kind of things that can make it really challenging when you have this atmosphere. And I think to see the last game of the year, to watch how they handled it, showed the growth of those areas.
Yeah, Casey, that atmosphere was no joke. They booed the posting of our starting lineup on the video board. Not the players. The players weren't on the field yet. They were booing the list of players. They were cheering as loud as you've ever heard for the players, the Lions coming out for their warm-ups an hour before the game. It was electric. It was amazing. Kudos to them. But yes, the Buccaneers handled it very well, as they said they would. We had 5 penalties in the game. Only 1 was on offense, and that was an OPI on Kate Otten. No procedural penalties on the line. That's pretty impressive, because that place, I can tell you, basically if you were trying to have a conversation with anybody next to you, because it's an open press box, you just had to wait until the Lions were on offense, because you just couldn't hear each other.
It's pretty amazing.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, and I'm so excited for this team and how they handled it. And again, just
408 yards.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's a really amazing performance. And again, I know we're not glossing over the fact that the season came to an end, that it was a loss, but I think that it is possible to hold things together that are, yes, it is sad they lost, but man, what a performance, what a fun game to watch, and I'm sure be a part of. But of course, because they did lose, it's always so amazing to me the way football works. The very next day, we're on to the next season.
Yeah.
There is, as much as there is an off season, there is not a break, I think is the way to put it. And I had Assistant General Manager John Spytek on my show earlier this week, and we were talking about that man, it is immediate into overdrive of draft and free agency and combine and all these things. So now that we know where the season ended, where do the Bucs sit in the draft, and what is that going to look like?
Well, yeah, because the Bucs were knocked out in the divisional round, they were going to be in the 25 to 28 range, and based on the 4 teams that lost in the divisional round, based on their record during the regular season. The Bucs were 9-8, and so were the Packers, who got eliminated. But the Packers had a worse strength of schedule, and that's the tiebreaker. So they get 25, and we get 26. And then throughout the draft, the Bucs and Packers will alternate between 25 and 26. And it's kind of, it's not really an important note or anything. It's just kind of an oddity. The Bucs have never picked 26th. Ever in team history. Never been slotted there or traded up to there or back to there. They've never made that pick. So if they stay put, first time.
That'll be really
There's
interesting.
been some interesting players taken there recently too, like Calvin Ridley and Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Was a 26th pick.
Yeah, that's what's so great. At this point that our scouts have found gems even in late rounds.
Oh yeah.
Picking 26th versus a little earlier in the first round, that's not going to throw them off their game.
Well, that goes all the way back to your lead point about how this team had $80 million in dead cap and still found a way to get it done because they did such a great job of identifying young talent, not just in the draft, although definitely in the draft, but also in undrafted free agents. So kudos to them.
All right, well, the season may be over, but of course the Bucs news is not. We will be covering all of your draft, free agency, everything going forward to see how this Bucs team is going to continue to build a roster that was just as fun, if not more fun, than this last year going into this next year. So stay tuned for all of that on Buccaneers.com, and we'll see you next time.